Is Kelsier really a hero? Or is he simply an overreaching tyrant? And in his desperation to save Scadrial, has Kelsier become the very monster he so tirelessly worked to defeat? To understand who Kelsier is today, let's first take a look at the man who broke in the Pits of Hathsin. Welcome to Second Breakfast. My name's Lee. Join me as we explore the lore of the Cosmere, the history of Warcraft, and other notable fantasy worlds. Before the Pits, Kelsier was a man defined by ego. He wanted to become a legend in the streets of Luthadel, and he wouldn't let anything get in the way of that. He was reckless, impulsive, and arrogant, and his ambitions reflected that. His only anchor was his wife Mare. They were equals, two of Luthadell's most renowned thieves, and where Kelsier was the fire, Mare was the rock. Mare dreamed of a world without ash and darkness, and she carried around with her a drawing of a flower from before the Lord Ruler's ascension. She followed the Larter faith, a religion based on the simple beauty of nature, and this is what Kelsier loved about Mare, her positivity and her hope. Mare provided Kelsier the vital balance and grounding that he needed. But then, something went wrong. A failed heist at Credit Shore, the Lord Ruler's palace. As they were captured, the Lord Ruler leaned in. He looked at Mare and he whispered, "Thank you." And in that one sentence, he sowed a seed of doubt that would haunt Kelsier for years. As punishment, they were both sent to the Pits of Hathsin to die. The pits were the Lord Ruler's primary source of the god metal atium. They were narrow, vertical cracks where the prisoners were forced to hunt for the atium. Atium geodes were fragile, and nearby allomancy would shatter them, so the harvest had to be done by hand and in total darkness. In that darkness, Kelsier and Mare whispered to each other. They shared rations, and they survived. But for Kelsier, the trust was gone. Kelsier just could not shake the belief that he was betrayed by his wife. How else could the Lord Ruler have known? He allowed a tyrant's lie to be the final word on her character. And then came the breaking point. Kelsier was unable to locate the atium geode that would pay for his life, and so Mare gave him one of hers. When asked, she told Kelsier that she had another, but Mare went back to the guards empty-handed. And because she had no atium to give, they beat her in front of the entire camp while Kelsier was forced to watch. Kelsier watched them as they beat her to death, and then he watched as they dragged her body away into the ash. That's when Kelsier snapped. The guilt of his doubt and the trauma of her murder collided, and in that moment, the survivor was born. So he levelled the camp and he slaughtered the guards. He murdered every single nobleman within 10 miles. That's the legend, but the reality is far more sobering. Kelsier left the pits as a man who had spent 16 months hating an innocent woman, only to realise his mistake as her body was dragged into the ash. This is Kelsier's heartbreaking tragedy. In many ways, he is responsible for Mare's death. He orchestrated the heist on the palace, but more disappointing is his lack of belief that his wife Mare did not betray him. This lack of belief led to her feeling that she needed to sacrifice her own life to save his. But without it, he never would have been a Mistborn. There is a certain poetry that her death gave him the power to create the world that she dreamed of. In the 11th metal, we see Kelsier picking himself out of the ashes and learning how to utilise his newfound status as a fully fledged Mistborn. Following the death of Mare, he is understandably raw and angry, but Kelsier decides the only way to move forward is to smile. At first, his smile was an obvious mask to hide his grief. But for Kelsier, it was really about regaining agency, because in the Lord Ruler's empire, a smile was an act of defiance against the oppression. His outward projected positivity made him the emotional bedrock for his crew, but beneath the performance, his grief had hardened into a singular, cold desire for vengeance. And while Kelsier now also wants to bring back a world where flowers bloom again, just as his wife Mare once did, he was equally motivated both by vengeance and his hatred for the system. Kelsier used Mare's dream as a justification for the vengeance that he wanted to pursue. And so, Kelsier engineered a series of heists on the noble houses with the aim of stealing their atium and inciting a civil war within the nobility. And while he tells his crew the raids are about atium and anarchy, he consistently steers them towards slaughtering the nobles residing there. To Kelsier, a mission on the Luthadel elite was not a success unless he achieved bloodshed during the process. And so, Kelsier has decided that his suffering in the Pits of Hathsin have given him the ultimate moral authority. This is his first real mirror to the Lord Ruler. Both men share the same chilling conviction that their vision is absolute and any amount of blood is a fair price to pay, that the ends justify the means. The Lord Ruler killed to maintain a world of ash, and Kelsier is willing to burn the world down just to see the Empire burn with it. But Kelsier's ambitions did not just simply stop at disrupting the final Empire. He also used specific calculated acts of generosity to influence the Scar. He wanted to shift their mindset from despair to defiance, and so he inspired them with his smile and he emboldened them with his tales of survival. But this all served to inflate his own legend. So by the time he stepped in front of the Lord Ruler, he had already won. He had ensured that even if he was killed, his legend would be the foundation of the new world. And so, Kelsier's ambition extended far past dismantling the final empire. He wanted to leave a legacy that would immortalise him forever. Scadrial did not yet know it, but he had just traded a tyrant of force for a tyrant of belief, and he did it so well that we all still call him a hero. And how can freeing Scadrial possibly make him a tyrant? Well, let's explore how Kelsier's death echoed through the Cosmere. Despite the Lord Ruler killing Kelsier in an instant, death was of course not the end for him. In Mistborn's secret history, we learn that when Kelsier died, he awoke in the cognitive realm. Here he met the Shard of Preservation, Leris. Kelsier was told that as he was a Mistborn, he would have a little extra time before eventually passing into the Beyond with his wife Mare. Leris encouraged Kelsier to let go, but as is usual for Kelsier, he acted in defiance. He jumped in the nearby liquid perpendicularity, the Well of Ascension, and thus Kelsier was able to remain in the cognitive realm. But how? In Rhythm of War, Chapter 15, Sahel provides various analogies to explain what just happened. If you let a man die with too invested a soul, or invest him right as he is dying, he will leave behind a shadow. You can nail that back onto a body, his own if you're feeling charitable. And once done, you have this Type 2 invested entity, dead man walking. This suggests that by jumping into the nearby pool, Kelsier's soul was filled with enough investiture to anchor him permanently to the cognitive realm, albeit without a body yet in the physical realm. According to Chris, a prominent Cosmere arcanist, she more eloquently refers to these individuals as cognitive shadows. Sahel later suggests that while they are alive, their humanity is lost. They are spren masquerading as men, and their minds bound by their intent. They essentially lose their ability to learn and grow, becoming more extreme versions of their intent. Intent is an important concept in the Cosmere. Sahel also explains that whilst cognitive shadows can be returned to the physical realm, this has to be done with the help of a shard, an aspect of a god. But there are other methods that this can be achieved, which we will also explore later. In a way, you can look at cognitive shadows as a snapshot of the soul at the very moment that it was created. For Kelsier, this is important. This was a man defined by survival, rebellion, and vengeance. But can he even be considered Kelsier anymore? Or is it simply a husk of him, frozen in time? It is important to consider the further ramifications of what this means. It could be argued that with Kelsier distilled to his baser aspects, survival and vengeance, this is very obviously not the Kelsier we know. The Kelsier we know was torn between his love for his crew and the differences in their viewpoints. He was a complex person with conflicting emotions, and with that disposed of, it is not hard to imagine how the focused intensity of his goal of survival will feed him as his story continues. After the events of Mistborn's secret history, Kelsier was met with a new fundamental flaw. He was tethered. As a cognitive shadow of Scadrial, he was spiritually bound to his home system, and while his ambition extended towards visiting other planets, he simply could not reach them. He also realised that to return to the physical world, he would need what is called a soul nail. This is the nail that Sahel was referring to. By the end of Bands of Mourning, we see the result of this search. A man with the iconic scars of the pits, speaking a single command: survive. Kelsier had solved the metallic arts to anchor himself to a body, and yet he still remained a prisoner of his own planet. To break the final chain, he created the Ghostbloods. So this answers part of my own question. Why did Kelsier feel so different? It's because all of the bits that I loved about Kelsier are now secondary to his intent as a cognitive shadow. His character-defining trait was now survival, and the lovable rogue is gone. Now, with that considered, what impact does that have on the Cosmere? On the world of Roshar, he isn't known as a folk hero or a saviour. They call him Thaidakar, the Lord of Scars. Throughout the Mistborn and Stormlight Archive series, we learn that the Ghostbloods mission is twofold: to protect Scadrial and to secure Kelsier's planetary mobility. The Ghostblood agents on Roshar act with a very clinical disregard for local life. They targeted Yasna just to eliminate a rival researcher who was uncovering the same secrets that the Ghostbloods sought to monopolise. In this instance, once again, Yasna represented the nobility, such as on Scadrial. Yet when we hear it from her perspective, Kelsier's mission doesn't seem so fun or plucky. More telling is the Ghostbloods' collaboration with the Fused. The Ghostbloods provided intelligence to the scholar Rabonia, facilitating the goals of a being who sought the very extinction of all the humans on Roshar. To Thaidakar, the moral cost of Rabonia's war was irrelevant compared to the information she possessed regarding the transformation of light. Now, to go back to that core Cosmere concept of intent, by stripping away Kelsier's humanity and leaving only his intent, the Cosmere has distilled the survivor down to his most dangerous essence. And when we look past the scars and the smile, we find that Kelsier has become a tyrant in the very mould of his Scadrian predecessor. And when we step back, the silhouette of Thaidakar looks hauntingly familiar. Kelsier has replicated the Lord Ruler's architecture for power, building a new system upon the same foundations. For example, the Lord Ruler's empire was built on a monopoly of atium, whilst Kelsier's mission on Roshar is simply a monopoly on investiture transports. Both realise that the one who controls the source of power dictates the rules of the game, and the Lord Ruler established the Still Ministry, casting himself as the immortal God King because he believed he was the only being capable of holding the world together. And Kelsier did the same thing with the Church of the Survivor, engineering his own martyrdom just to ensure that he remained the ultimate authority even in death. One ruled through terror, the other through hope. But the result is identical, a world that cannot define its own freedom without using the name of its leader. Kelsier effectively integrated the Lord Ruler's methods to cement his own leadership, ensuring that his influence remains the primary linchpin of the country. But perhaps most chilling is the moral compass that they both share, the absolute conviction that the ends will always justify the means. For the Lord Ruler, ruthlessness was the price of stability. He would have facilitated 1,000 years of misery if it meant the world didn't collapse. But for Kelsier, it is the price of survival. Whether it is the genocide of the nobility on Scadrial or collaborating with the Fused on Roshar, Thaidakar views human life as secondary in a much larger equation. Kelsier's victory over the Lord Ruler meant taking on the same pressures required to guide the planet. He broke the chains of one world, only to find himself forging new ones across the Cosmere. And so, while Kelsier survived the pits, he survived death, and he even survived the end of his world. But in the end, he couldn't survive his own legend. Ultimately, whether Kelsier is a hero or a monster is a matter of where you stand in the Cosmere. To the people of Scadrial, he is simply the survivor, the man who reached out from the pits to give them a future. But to the people of Roshar, he is Thaidakar, a cold, distant shadow willing to drain their world to fuel his own ambition. So what do you think? For me, the whole reason that I've done this is just to try and understand why my feelings in Stormlight Archive are so different compared to Mistborn with regards to Kelsier. He doesn't feel even remotely close to the same character. But then I learned it is simply a matter of perspective. Watching my favourite character act so ruthlessly against the characters I was coming to love in that series, I am really excited to see what he's going to be like in Mistborn Era 3, and just to see if he retained any of that lovable rogue nature that we've come to love. But somehow, I do doubt it. The small glimmer of hope I have is that in his conversation with Sazed at the end of Mistborn Era 2, there was an inkling of humanity there, so I'm really hoping that we can get a bit more of that in Era 3, but let's see. If Sahel's right, it's only going to get worse. Maybe he'll get mad like the Heralds. Or just maybe he'll go looking for the lost shard of ambition, and further cement his name in godhood. Thank you for listening. I would love to hear your thoughts on the comments. Did you also, like me, struggle with the difference in his personality between Mistborn Era 1 and Stormlight Archive? Or do you think this is a rather aggressive hit piece on your favourite character? Either way, let's talk about it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be doing new videos every 2 weeks on topics just like this one and anything else that I feel like I need to learn more about in the Cosmere. Because if I have the question, maybe you do too. Thanks for your time, and I'll see you in the next one.